Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to staff meeting Tuesday, July 15th. I think we have one topic, maybe two, not sure yet. Manager Stoltz.
Good morning, Chairman, Commission. The topic we're going to discuss today is a topic we have discussed in some staff meetings and during the budget process. But there's Mr. Diltz put out a email a couple weeks ago, and there were some questions on the structure. And it is a topic is the Regional Forensic Science Center. Shelley is, or Dr. Stedman is here today to talk to us about, again, to remind us of the needs and the harms and why we have to move forward with something at this location. And then Andrew is here to talk about the footprint and the geography of what it is we're going to try to build. This is imminent for discussion for the CIP budget discussion on August 20th. So the timing is right on this. And I think as our plan was, we were going to do some of the work in 2026, the planning and the architectural work, and then 27 would actually be the year of the build. So it'd be split over 2 years. Often the wings up there, not necessarily germane to the topic today, but one we might get into is the whole KU med campus issue and the health department issue of what could potentially happen up there. And it's germane to this discussion because the health department is in the footprint of the Regional Forensic Science Center. So there may be some movement back and forth there as well that I thought it was appropriate we discussed publicly today. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Stedman. And she'll step us through the.
Very good. Welcome, Dr. Stedman.
Thank you. Shelley Stedman, the director of the Regional Forensic Science Center. And thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about this topic again and hopefully hit the high points, some of which you've heard before, and maybe some that I'd like to share with you that you haven't thought about. Certainly you haven't thought about this. It's our mission statement, and I'm going to start with that. The Forensic Science Center strives to provide the highest quality medical, legal, and advanced forensic laboratory services to Sedgwick County. Death investigation and forensic autopsy services are conducted in a compassionate and objective manner to achieve accurate certification of cause and manner of death. The Forensic Science Laboratory services provide unbiased and accurate analytical testing to support the resolution of criminal cases. As an independent agency operating under the Division of Public Safety, the Forensic Science Center collaborates with public health and criminal justice stakeholders to reduce crime and prevent deaths. And I have two important points to follow with that. First of all, when I worked in the DNA lab, I knew that my work prevented crime. I knew that when I got a CODIS hit or a database hit on a burglary, and I gave law enforcement that person's name, that prevented another burglary from happening because of this thing called recidivism. I also knew that by virtue of preventing crime, I saved lives. Now, on the pathology side of what we do, it's not for the benefit of the person whose life has been lost. It's not that person benefits from the autopsy, but certainly their family may, by knowing something about a medical history that may have gone unknown to them, or it may bring them some justice if that involved a violent crime. And so what we do is important, not because of the person that's lost, but because of the vital stats that we collect and we provide to the community that makes the quality of life better here. And as such, our mission statement, which we rewrote in 2020, captures the two very distinct operations that occur in the Forensic Science Center. And that's incredibly unique in the United States. There are very few facilities like ours that have those two distinct functionings coexist under one roof. And as such, I'd like to point out that there are some advantages in distinguishing those. One critical example is air handling. We do have very specific air handling in our facility today, but I can also tell you that when I work in the DNA lab, I should not smell what goes on in the autopsy suite. And that's why complete physical separation of some of our services can actually be conducive to slightly better practices. And I also want to help you understand how evidence flows through our facility. When Wichita Police Department goes to a homicide scene and collects evidence, they have a case number for that within their agency. They bring that evidence to the Forensic Science Center, and we give it a laboratory case number and assign it to a discipline for testing. whether it's DNA, firearms. And in the autopsy suite, our pathologists and our pathologist assistants collect blood, urine, vitreous fluid, and they also submit that to our laboratory under their pathology case number, and we assign it a laboratory case number, and it goes to the forensic discipline of choice, most often toxicology. That said, we treat our district coroner's office very much like any agency in the 18th Judicial District, whether that's Wichita Police Department, Derby Police Department, the district coroner's office. And so we somewhat operate as distinct entities within our building now. And so one thing I don't think we've talked about yet is why we decided to move things or relocate or remodel as we have decided to do. And I want you to understand that we've tried to recognize the involvements between toxicology and pathology. Nearly every autopsy case has specimens collected for tox testing. So having our chief toxicologist and our forensic pathologists in close proximity is meaningful. Likewise, we have other disciplines with highly specific and particular infrastructure needs, like DNA. And those need very specific and well-designed spaces. And in general, remodeling and retrofitting space is not a good approach for accommodating expansion in those disciplines. So as you're all aware, this is currently our footprint. We had the original building, the 24,000 square foot building in the lower left-hand corner that was built in 1995. I generally refer to that as the legacy building. And then we added 7,500 square feet in 2010, and I generally refer to that as the annex. Its purpose was to expand drug identification laboratory services, offices, and also provided us with a larger evidence vault. The history of this project, it begins in 2014, over 10 years ago, when we recognized the need to expand the DNA lab. And we started with a two-story design on some property that we owned adjacent to the existing facility. We thought that if we expanded the DNA lab, that would provide adequate space for toxicology to expand into laboratory space and firearms and pathology to expand with some additional storage space. However, that was on the watch list for quite some time until 2020, as we began to recognize an even further need for space, and we revisited that design, came up with a single level design in hopes of decreasing the parking by variance so that we could fit it onto the property that we owned. And we proceeded with CIP presentations in 22 and 23, and that project was actually approved in the 2024 budget. Going back to the map, the legacy building, the annex, and this was the proposed site for the one-story DNA laboratory addition. However, as you're all aware, this property, which was required for the footprint of that building, was unable to be acquired. So in 2024, we completed a new space study, and in February of 2025, we had the cost analysis for the now third design. Just a review of some of our limitations. We have pretty severe utility issues. It's to the point where you have to unplug something to plug something else in. And that was really exemplified in 2020 when we added a body cooler, and I had to make the uncomfortable choice to pull our genetic analyzer in the DNA lab off of the backup generator, because I certainly didn't want the power to be out for 6 hours and us not to be able to cool bodies in the morgue. So that's to the point of the decisions we're making now. We have no electrical capacity for new instrumentation in the legacy building. Network ports are difficult to add. The new cooler that we did add throughout the course of COVID is not morgue grade, so we're experiencing some disintegration because we do use that cooler to store some of the more compromised remains. And again, we've talked about some of the retrofitted space and how that air cooling for the high-level instrumentation is inefficient for those operations. And what I want to focus on now, finally, is just some of the inefficiencies. We're unable to currently use our firing range. It's really being used for storage of long guns. As is consistent with our strategic plan to develop an internship program, we're not really able to do that right now because we don't have extra people to provide those learning opportunities or a place for those people to sit at a computer. Our pathology specimens are stored all over the place. We have stock jars full of organs in one room, paraffin blocks in another room, slides in another room, blood samples stored elsewhere, and a lot of these things are stored in residential type of refrigeration systems. Long story short, we can't really add people because we don't have office space. We can't really add robots because we don't have bench space or place to plug them in. And what I want you to be keenly aware of is the last thing we want is infrastructure failures, because that inevitably brings about bad press. And nobody wants that. We've all read the stories where a forensic scientist testifies in a manner they shouldn't have, or an evidence room leaks and evidence gets destroyed. And we work very hard to ensure the integrity of the evidence. It's not stored in rooms, it's stored in vaults. And finally, I think the biggest take-home message is inefficiencies. When the Forensic Science Center isn't efficient, law enforcement can't be efficient because they can't progress their investigation. When the Forensic Science Center isn't efficient, the courts can't be efficient because they can't charge cases, they can't prosecute cases. And my staff is keenly aware that when they have a backlog and when they're inefficient, that it affects every one of their stakeholders. I've got 40 people back at the Forensic Science Center who think that their job is the most important job in the world. Now, they're counting on me to come over here today and convince you 5 people to agree with them. And that's it's a pretty tall task. And I don't suspect I can. There's a lot of important jobs, and every job in Sedgwick County is important and serves our public. But what I can ask for you today is that I can tell you that those 40 people don't operate at a level where they're happy with being adequate. They operate at a level where they strive to be in compliance with best practice. And so please consider giving them a space to work in where they can achieve that task. So what we're looking at on the top image on this slide is the parking lot and the main entrance of the Regional Forensic Science Center. And if you turn 180 degrees, what you would see is the parking lot of the health department. And then it's a gated lot. And in the forefront of that picture, you see a lot of their storage pods. I don't know if those are in use or if the health department owns those. But the vast majority of that road area there is lined with storage and specialty vehicles used by the health department. And so this is the location that we think is most appropriate to expand our facility so that we can maintain continuity of services and best practices in the services we provide. That said, we're looking at this 24,600 square foot footprint that is in that parking lot. I would point out that just to the east of that, there is another parking lot, public parking, that the health department currently uses. And in the legacy building and the annex that are our existing facilities, we plan to maintain basically our district coroner services and our toxicology laboratory services. We also have one toxicology chemist that is cross-trained in fire debris, and we have sufficient space, and that lab's already equipped, so we will probably leave fire debris unit there. All of our administrative operations, including myself, will stay. The new building will consist of the forensic laboratories, including DNA, drug identification, firearms, all of our evidence receiving and quality assurance will maintain there. We're seeking to expand our classroom facility and have a new classroom on that, as well as some conference rooms. We have sacrificed our main conference room in the Legacy building for office space already. So our doctors no longer have a room where they can meet with district attorney, their representatives, or law enforcement. So we want to be able to capture that back. And I would also point out, I just spent last week at the CDC conference for our OD2A grant. It was a required conference, and I traveled there with a representative from KU Med School who works in and very closely with the health department. And we are now, with our OD2A project, providing surveillance data to the health department, which directs their harm reduction services. And so having all of those entities right here in this location has really, we've realized a lot of benefit to that, especially in recent years, and especially throughout COVID, because we were very actively involved with the health department. And also in preserving the central location, where just about every municipality in the county has a really easy time getting to us. It's very centrally located, close to Kellogg and the canal route. And I think that that's appreciated. And our main user, obviously, PD, is right down the road. So with that, I'm going to give the podium to Andrew, unless anybody has any questions for me.
Why don't we wait, if you don't mind, Dr. Stedman, let's hear from Andrew first. That way we have it all together, and then we can come back to the bench here or this for discussion with commissioners. I think it'd be easier to have the entire perspective before we do that.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Andrew Diltz, Director of Facilities. Dr. Stedman really covered why this expansion is necessary, so I might skip some of this on some of my slides. She also talked about some of the CIP history. Most recently was the CIP in 2023 that was approved for just over $7 million for that addition that we were unable to move forward with because we couldn't acquire the adjacent property. For 2026, we're coming back to you with a new idea. The new proposed idea is to build on land that we do own that's catty corner from the existing Forensic Science Center. So in 2026, we would ask for just over $1.2 million for architectural and engineering design so we could design this new addition, as well as what remodeling the existing building would look like. In 2027, we would ask for just over $19 million, which would include $4 million to remodel the existing building, and just over $16 million in 2027 for the construction of the new addition, as well as a building permit and taking into inflation between now and 2027. We have just under $2 million allowed for owner's costs, which would include items like contingency, the geotech for the new addition, signage, computers, network switches, et cetera. And then we have approximately just over $830,000 allowed for FF&E, which is to help cover us for any specialized equipment and calibration needs that we may need to hire, because the manufacturers of this equipment, they're not here. So we have to fly them in from somewhere else to move that equipment and then recalibrate it once it's in a new location. This new building, as Dr. Stedman already expressed, will allow for the DNA, firearms, drug ID, and fire debris laboratories. And then we'll remodel the existing DNA lab for tox, medical investigators, and autopsies. When we're looking at this right now, we've worked with Dr. Stedman to look at the next 20 years. This will satisfy us the next 20 years. We're confident in that. The previous 2023 CIP, we were still landlocked on that. So if that had gone through, if we had acquired that property, we couldn't expand anymore. This really allows us to build across the street on a parking lot in a city block that has the potential for health to move out, giving us more space for forensic science to build in the future. When we're looking 25, 30 years ahead, this will really allow us to have that campus setting in an existing location within that footprint. There is the proposed new addition. You can see the health department building on East 9th is currently directly south of that. And we're also working with KU Med to see what it would look like to move the health department into KU Med. So you really have that campus setting between health and forensic science and KU. I mean, it really creates that kind of health corridor. So, and then we have a parking lot to the east of the health department. So as we start building this building, that parking lot to the east, as you can see from this aerial map, it's really not being utilized right now. So if we needed that additional space, we could take advantage of that vacant lot to the east. Dr. Stedman and I are available for any questions.
Okay, Andrew, thank you. And Dr. Stedman, if you want to come back up, I'm sure. I'm going to start with just a pretty quick question. I appreciate that you started with the mission statement and you referenced the collaboration, obviously with criminal justice stakeholders, which I think is an obvious collaboration. Also in that statement, you talk about collaborations with public health. You're right next door to the health department now. Can you help better explain what is collaboration with the health department? What does that look like? Tangibly, what does that look like?
So one of our big projects right now is we collect drugs and drug paraphernalia at scenes of death. We process that in our drug ID laboratory, and we provide them and the CDC with those results. That project kicked off 2 years ago. There were 18 facilities in the United States that were awarded the component B that Forensic Science Center received for that. And I think one of the main reasons why is because we're a single department that could not only collect the samples, but also test them. And I realized that at the meeting because there were a lot of places that didn't have that luxury. So when we push that data, the very goal of overdose data to action programs with the CDC is to have surveillance folks like us provide information to the actors that are interested in harm reduction and prevention, because what is out there is the formula for how they approach solving that problem.
Yeah, that's helpful. You had made a comment. I appreciate your reference to your employees over there and their desire to be excellent at what they do. And for the record, they are excellent at what they do, and you're excellent at what you do. And we're really proud of the work you do. But you mentioned best practices. I don't know how any other way to ask this question other than just to ask it. With where we are now today, are we compliant with best practices? And if not, is that simply because of space constraints?
Well, we're compliant with accreditation standards, but there are some practices, some recommendations. For example, positive air pressure in the post-amplification room of the DNA lab. Where we generate the DNA profiles, we're making quadrillions of copies of DNA. And what we have to control is that that does not re-enter into the main laboratory where evidence is screened and contaminated. And so by virtue of that, air should not be pushed out. It should always be pulled in and filtered before it leaves the building. We don't have the capability to do that. In fact, when the building was designed, our post-amplification room was equipped with that, but we've now had to expand that into a space where that's not present. Andrew, probably Kendall, can speak to the number of times he's over there on a weekly basis dealing with our handling systems. And another thing that we're compliant because we're using hoods in another area of the building. When we built the annex, it was fitted with a lot of exhaust fume hoods. Our laboratory in the tox section uses some carcinogenic extraction chemicals that have to be used in the hood. They only have 2 hoods, but they have 7 employees. So we're making use of 2 hoods that are half a city block from where they would generally extract samples. So again, we're meeting that requirement, but we're not efficiently doing it.
Yeah, I sense that. What do you have any concerns with some of your services and departments within your department being across the street? Does this create efficiency issues for you? Do you have any concerns with optimizing the product that we deliver to our community with being in 2 buildings to perform different services?
Well, I'll be the first to admit that admitting this was a solution was my idea. So concerns, we have implemented a LIMS system that increased our efficiencies in evidence receiving substantially. And so we have the resources administratively for those individuals to, all it will entail is for them to transport antemortem samples, the tox lab tests, over for the testing and to retrieve them when they're done. Because our autopsy will be able to directly submit to the toxicology lab. They will no longer be going through evidence. We will facilitate that by virtue of making better use of our LIMS system. Will I be walking back and forth a lot? Yes. We have some ideas on how we're going to efficiently transport and safely transport evidence when we need to. But I don't have concerns about it being a problem or causing any digression in the quality of the services we provide.
Okay, it's helpful. Okay, other questions? Yeah, Commissioner Bluebell.
Thank you, Chairman. Just trying to get a better understanding as to the impact in court cases and timelines, and how will we see that change between the current facility and if we go forward here?
Well, I'm not going to be so brazen as to stand up here and tell you that we are magically going to alleviate all of our backlogs when we get this building, because that's simply not true. And in fact, I anticipate that throughout the pain in the course of relocating, moving, and remodeling things in a stepwise manner, that's going to disrupt some of our services for a period of time. We're actually going to have service delays. But what I can tell you is that if we don't look at expanding in this manner, we absolutely have no opportunity to ever resolve those issues. In other words, if we can't add people and we can't add state-of-the-art equipment, then we can't ever improve those issues.
You're basically saying you're ceiling today. There's no way for improvement today, or nowhere for efficiency without getting into a different facility.
There's nowhere to grow. And the last significant advancement we made towards those efficiencies, quite frankly, I would credit this commission for, because we have had a significant increase in retention of employees. There's a lot of elements that play into turnaround time and backlog reduction. One of it is quality, fully trained people. The other is the instrumentation, the number of scientists you have, and that's the aspect that we currently can't advance.
Appreciate that. Other questions? Commissioner Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just the proposal we did not get. I think we had trouble getting the housing to make it. There were some housing concerns that people didn't want to sell or whatever. What year was that proposed 8,700 square foot proposed addition? Was that like 2017 or 2018 when that happened?
In 2023, it was approved for just over $7 million to expand onto that footprint.
But you're right, Dr. Sedgwick had been talking about it for years at that point, but it had been watch listed. And then it was actually included in an approved CIP for 2023. And now we're coming back to basically amend that project.
Okay, so that's what the slide here on this slide was referring to, says it was approved in the 2024 budget. That's it. Okay. I do have some concerns about the separation of these facilities. That is not ideal. I didn't like the idea of a two-story building. That's not ideal, obviously. I think this is also problematic. One of the things I would say is, you try to solve a problem. First of all, I think we need to agree that there's a problem to be solved. And I think I don't know if my colleagues agree, but I agree there's a problem to be solved. And I do think that we ought to, I think we validated that. So I think we're beyond just, expressing the fact that there's a need here. I'm not convinced this is the right location. And I think that we need to maybe look at other options. The separation of these facilities is not ideal. I hope we all understand that, agree with that. And yeah, I'm not trying to be negative to this community necessarily, but it is a difficult community right there. And to invest that kind of money right there for such a very important service. You talk about the access to the highway. And all of that is an advantage. I don't know that that's compelling enough for me to say that's the right location. For this much money, I think we have some options. And I know of at least one other option. I'm not sure I should say it here, but I think we should take a look at some other options. And I think, and if you put more money into remodeling or preparing the building, I think you'd have a lot more space and a lot better location. And I think it might actually save taxpayer money at the same time. So I don't disagree that we have a problem to be solved. I just don't know that I like this being the answer. And I think one of my biggest concerns here is the separation of these facilities. You say you don't mind going back and forth. We just had a conversation recently about emergency management, having to park across the street and the fence around that facility. And there were some questions about employee safety going in and out into that building. We just spent money on a fence to protect, a gated entrance for the employees to park in that facility's parking lot. To me, it's a concern. And I think we've had other county offices downtown with some of the other issues happening downtown. I think that, employee safety has to be a concern. And I guess I'm not convinced that this is the right location for this type of investment. So I do want to support something. I just don't know if this is it.
If I may, Commissioner Howell, the existing Forensic Science Center already has a gated fenced-in parking lot. And then the health department where we're putting this building would also be within an existing fenced-in parking lot. So we wouldn't have to construct a fence as part of this to add employee safety. That's already taken care of with this proposed plan. And then if we're looking at moving this to another location, then we're looking at approximately 50,000 square feet worth of, and maybe it's 60,000 square feet worth of remodeling, and the amount of infrastructure that goes into what forensic science needs when it comes to the electrical circuitry, the hoods, the makeup air units, the air handling units. It is so robust and so in such high demand to cut in walls, to cut in holes for the ductwork, for all of that equipment. It adds a significant dollar amount to the remodel cost and or new construction. With this proposal, our new construction footprint is a lot less. It's basically half. If we relocate somewhere else, we'd be adding a lot more square footage. And typically when we do that, we add cost to this. So my personal opinion, I think this is probably the most economical solution that we've put before you today. I don't know that we can find something that's going to fit their need that's existing.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew, and respectful for colleagues' previous comments. I think I have a lot of confidence that I think this is a well thought out plan. I know we have challenges in the near future with relocating all of our ComCare facilities onto one campus. That'll be a pretty good task to try to do. I know that I feel good about what we've done at 911. Security of employees in the facility was of big concern, and I think we got a great security plan around that with that fence, those gated fence, and I haven't heard any problems with employee security with the neighbors and the neighborhood, so to speak. So I'm fully I think this has been well planned out, and we voted for this in 23, and I'm ready to move on. I think it's a good plan.
Other thoughts? Yeah, I think, Dr. Sedgwick, I think that if we could all get it into one building, I think everybody's dream scenario would be to have it all in one building. I just don't think that's our reality, and I understand that, and I appreciate the thought that's went into this. Also, I appreciate you unveiling the curtain a bit and letting us understand the challenges that you have because of space constraints and the need to the community, that if you had more space, the deliverable to the community and what that would be, and deliverable to our health department and deliverable to all of our public safety stakeholders. I think it's measurable. So I think you see a commission that's in the spirit of trying to conserve as many dollars as we can and do things efficiently as we can. But the thing that I also think you hear from this commission is we're not going to compromise justice and public safety too. So, which means there's investments that have to be made from time to time. And this is one of those, it feels in my view that it's beyond time to get you and your staff the space that they need to do it. So I'm going to support it. I think we've made the case, but we want to make sure that your staff knows that we're going to invest into what we do. I appreciate Commissioner Howe's comments that we all agree on the premise that we've got to do something. We've got to act here. And I think it's healthy to talk about the best approach, but I would agree with Andrew's comments that I think this might be the best that we can do to keep things on the same campus. So, okay, any other questions or comments? Hey, Dr. Stedman, thank you. Andrew, thank you. Tom, lasting thought?
That is all we had. We have a couple of new employees in the room that I think
Yeah.
I'd like to acknowledge. Tanya, can you go first?
Sure, you bet. So we have a couple new faces we'd like to introduce. First, I'd like to introduce John Myers. John is our new park superintendent. He comes to us from the private sector, and I'm pretty convinced him working for Sedgwick County, he is going to become well acquainted with county government and convert to government side. So just want to introduce John and welcome him.
John, welcome. Appreciate it. Looking forward to working with you.
And I'm going to hand it over to Nicole. Nicole has a new employee she'd like to introduce.
Good morning, everyone. We have hired a new communications coordinator. It is Jocelyn Schiffer-Decker. She is joining us from Cake News and brings a lot of good experience that we're really excited to have in that position. So she's been here a couple days and we're just filling her in on all the fun we have here at Sedgwick.
Yeah, lots of fun. Jocelyn, welcome. We're
Happy to be.
Yeah, we're glad to have you guys. Well, cool. Very good. Tanya, appreciate that opportunity to meet new hires and welcome to the team. Hey, Tom, what else? That's all we got. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. We'll see you then.